Tractate Beitzah, page 37a, top of page, with the words De'is le isha ubanim, because it is dealing with a case in which he already has a wife and children, so that he has already fulfilled the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply, and his betrothal of another woman is only an optional act. Nor perform chalitza, nor perform levirate marriage. The Gemara asks, but doesn't one perform a mitzvah through these acts? Why are they categorized as optional? The Gemara answers, no, it is necessary for the Mishnah to categorize them as optional, as it is speaking of a case when there is an older brother, since the general principle is that the preferable way to carry out the mitzvah is for the oldest brother to perform levirate marriage. The performance of levirate marriage by a younger brother is classified as optional. The Gemara clarifies the reason for the prohibition against judging, betrothing, etc. on Shabbat and festivals. And in all these cases, what is the reason they may not be performed? It is a decree lest one write down the proceedings of these acts in a document, such as the verdict of the judgment, the document of betrothal, a document testifying to the chalitza, or a marriage contract in the case of levirate marriage. It was taught in the Mishnah, and the following are notable because of the full-fledged mitzvah involved in them, yet are prohibited on Shabbat. One may not consecrate, nor take a valuation vow, nor consecrate objects for use by the priests or the temple. The Gemara explains, all these cases are prohibited because of a decree due to their similarity to commerce. These acts, which all involve the transfer of ownership to the temple treasury, resemble commerce, which is prohibited on a festival. It was taught in the Mishnah, and one may not separate truma and tithes. The Gemara asks, is it not obvious that this is so? In doing so, one makes forbidden and food usable, a form of repairing, which is a prohibited labor. Rav Yosef taught, it is necessary for the Mishnah to teach this only to state that it is prohibited even to separate truma in order to give it to a priest on the same day. One could have thought that since he is separating the produce in order to give it to a priest, it should be permitted like any other preparation of food. The Mishnah therefore states explicitly that it is prohibited. The Gemara comments, and this applies only to produce that had the status of untithed produce, and therefore was required to be tithed the day before the festival. However, produce that became untithed now on the festival itself, such as dough prepared on the festival, which becomes untithed and requires challah to be taken from it only after the dough is made. With regard to separating challah from it, one may separate the challah and give it to a priest even on a festival. The Gemara asks a question, when the Mishnah describes those cases as notable because they are optional, is this to say that their prohibition is not because of a rabbinic decree to enhance the character of Shabbat as a day of rest? Likewise, with regard to those cases described as notable because they are mitzvot, is this to say that their prohibition is not because of Shvut? The Mishnah, by referring only to the first of its three categories as Shvut implies that the acts listed in the following categories do not involve Shavut, but this is not so. As the Gemara stated above, all these acts are prohibited by rabbinic decree to enhance the character of Shabbat and the festival as days of rest. Amar Yitzchak, Lo miboy ka'amar, Lo miboy Shvut, Greateta de Asur, etc. Rabbi Yitzchak said they all indeed are prohibited as Shvut. The Mishnah lists three types of Shvut: those that involve no mitzvah whatsoever, those that have a mitzvah aspect to them, and those that constitute a full-fledged mitzvah. And the Tana is speaking and arranges his list, employing the style of there is no need. In other words, he arranges the cases in order of increasing notability. First, there is no need to state. It's most obvious. That plain Shvut, which involves no mitzvah at all, is prohibited. But even Shvut of an optional act, in other words, an act that's a minor mitzvah, is also prohibited. And there's no need to state. It's obvious that Shvut of an optional act is prohibited. But even the Shvut of a full-fledged mitzvah is also prohibited. It was taught in the Mishnah. The sages spoke of all these acts being prohibited, even with regard to a festival. All the more so are they prohibited on Shabbat. There is no difference between a festival and Shabbat except for work involving food. The Gemara raises a contradiction against this form of an earlier Mishnah. One may lower produce from the roof into the house through a skylight. To prevent it, Mashilin Derech Aruba 214 Aruba. Through a skylight to prevent it from being spoiled by the rain on a festival but not on Shabbat. This shows that there is another difference between a festival and Shabbat besides food preparation. Doing a strenuous activity to prevent a loss permitted on a festival but prohibited on Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef said, this is not difficult, as this Mishnah here, which does not include the halakha of lowering produce, as an example of a difference between Shabbat and a festival, is in accordance with Rabbi Eliezer, whereas that previous Mishnah does cite it as a difference, is in accordance with Rabbi Yehoshua. Rav Yosef elaborates on his statement, as it is taught in the Beitzah. If a cow and her calf, which may not be slaughtered on the same day because of the biblical prohibition, you shall not kill it and its offspring both in one day. Leviticus 22:28, fell into a pit on a festival and their owner wishes to take them out. Rabbi Eliezer says one may raise the first in order to slaughter it and then slaughter it. And second, he provides its sustenance in its place so that it will not die in the pit. It is prohibited to undertake the strenuous task of raising an animal out of a pit except for the purpose of eating it on a festival. Therefore, since one cannot slaughter both animals on the festival, only one can be raised, while the other should be sustained in its place until after the festival. Rabbi Yehoshua, however, says one may raise the first with the intent of slaughtering it, and then change his mind and not slaughter it. Then he may go back and employ artifice by deciding that he prefers to slaughter the second one, and he raises the second. Having raised both animals, if he so desires, he may slaughter this one. If he so desires, he may slaughter that one. Rav Yosef understands the argument between the two sages as follows. Rabbi Yehoshua maintains that it is permitted to perform a strenuous activity on a festival in order to prevent a loss, and therefore he may raise both animals lest one left behind die in the pit. Rabbi Eliezer, on the other hand, holds that one may not perform a strenuous activity to prevent a loss, so the second animal must be left in the pit even though it may die there. It may therefore be posited that the Mishnah permits slaughtering produce on a festival to prevent loss is in accordance with Rabbi Yehoshua's opinion. Rabbi Eliezer would disagree with this leniency, and the principle that there is no difference between Shabbat and a festival other than food preparation would remain intact. Abaye said to Rav Yosef, from where do you know that this analysis of the sage's opinions is correct? Perhaps Rabbi Eliezer stated his opinion that a strenuous activity to prevent monetary loss is prohibited on a festival only thus far, there in the case of the animals in the pit, where it is possible to sustain the second animal in the pit and keep it from dying. But here, in the case of the produce on the roof, where there is no possibility of preventing the loss to providing sustenance, he would not prohibit lowering the produce to save it from loss. Alternatively, one can propose an opposite argument. Rabbi Yehoshua stated his opinion that a strenuous activity to prevent loss is permitted only thus far. There in the case of the two animals, because it is possible to employ artifice to raise the second animal, so that an observer might assume that he was not acting to preserve his property, but he wished to eat the first animal and subsequently changed his mind. But here, in the case of the produce on the roof, where it is not possible to employ artifice, as it is clear that he is acting to salvage his produce, Rabbi Yehoshua would not be lenient. Therefore, Rabbi Yosef's approach to resolving the contradiction has no support from this Beitzah. Rather, Papa said, this resolution of the contradiction is to be rejected in favor of the following. This is not difficult, as this case is in accordance with Beit Shammai, whereas that case follows the approach of Beit Hillel. As we learned in the Mishnah, Beit Shammai say, on a festival one may not take out a child who cannot walk. You know what? Small amount, but we'll still stop here because we need to get going.